In the book, you write about specific instances where U.S. fragility has reared its head. Could you talk about some of these instances? A lot of them surround U.S. military interventions that are very recent in our memory and still are ongoing, but have shown, I think, exactly what you have described earlier, this fragility. So could you talk about these military interventions?
Yeah, one of the reasons that Noam and I decided to do this book was because we felt that a new generation of people may not actually know some of the features of these three wars in particular, the war against Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. And there were some common features that we had talked about over the years, that made these not different wars, but somehow part of a similar pattern was very clear. For instance, in each of the cases, the adversary of the United States was very keen to negotiate. In each of the cases, in fact, Iraq twice, once in 1990 and the other time in 2002, 2003. Iraq very keen to negotiate. United States said nothing doing, we're going to bomb you. Afghanistan, the Taliban, very keen to negotiate in 2001, said that, look, we'll even hand over Osama bin Laden. United States said, forget it, and entered into a 20-year war and occupation of that country, destroying whatever remained of Afghan institutions. And then Libya, where it was very clear that Mr. Gaddafi had told the African Union, had told the United Nations, had in fact told the United States that he was willing to negotiate, wanted to negotiate with the people who had conducted the uprising in Benghazi, and the United States said, "Forget it. We're going to just come and bomb you." This unity of structure, as it were, in some ways helps us understand U.S. imperialism. That all the liberal claptrap about humanitarian intervention and the United States being interested in negotiation, it's all belied by the evidence of these three wars. And of course, it shows also on the one side the immense power of the US. You can do anything, you can bomb any country, get away with it, despite the fact that the um, United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan, said on the record, he tells BBC that the US war on Iraq is illegal. There's no consequences, no investigation by the International Criminal Court. None of the principals in the United States accused of anything by important international institutions. None of that. It's just a complete cakewalk. They can do whatever they want. That demonstrates the strength. But then you have the dialectic, you have the weakness. You can bomb a country. In fact, it's something quite ugly. Takes over 100 years to build a state, build the institutions of the state. And the United States, with its immense firepower, can destroy the state in an afternoon. It destroyed the Libyan state, destroyed the Iraqi state, and destroyed the state in Afghanistan. Well, you can destroy the state, but having occupied a country, let's say Afghanistan, 2002, United States enters as an occupying force. You put in your Vichy regime, as it were, which is to say Hamid Karzai. You can't govern, you can't control the place. And that shows a lot of weakness. There's an inability to drive a political agenda. The United States, because it's a unilateralist power, or at least only a multilateralist if it includes Europeans and perhaps Japan. The United States unwilling to bring in regional powers in around Afghanistan, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which has just met in Samarkand, Uzbekistan. U.S. refused to bring the SCO in. Just allowed Iran and China to help when the US wanted it on US terms. They were not prepared to create a regional, discussion about what to do with Afghanistan after the fall of the Taliban. That demonstrates the, immense political weakness of the US. And that's again another way in which we can understand fragility. One side, immense military power; on the other side, the impossibility of driving a political agenda. Look at Iraq today, Danny. I don't know if you've been following Iraq. There was a parliamentary election in 2019, another parliamentary election in 2021. The political system set in place by the US prevents a bloc from winning a majority, so that the Iraqi parliament is always going to be weak. In 2019, the bloc Sairun, led by Muqtada al-Sadr, had only 54 seats in over 300 seat parliament. That was the largest bloc. Obviously, couldn't make a government. And so, what do you have? You have a former intelligence official, so-called independent in the parliament, become the prime minister, and he has basically governed over a state of non-stop protest and horrendous crackdown by this government. So there's no way that you can establish political control, and that's the fragility.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, those are all, I think, really good points. The fact is, I mean, even recently, you have such a level of instability that Iraq is being kind of used as also a launching pad on this war on Syria. You have recent revelations that the U.S. is transporting Syrian oil across the Iraqi border so that it can then fuel itself as well as the forces that it's supporting in the occupation of Syria. So this instability is so rampant, and it does serve very key geopolitical goals, but it also has the consequence, as you said, of creating what is a very volatile situation in this region in particular. There is a lot of, I think, inattention to this right now because, and I think I want to get your opinion on this, but the relationship to this fragility with this conflict that's happening in Ukraine. And now we have the Biden administration mulling over, I think they already announced some more intense sanctions on China's tech sector in an attempt to boost the Chips and Science Act and try to boost this effort to isolate China around semiconductors. But we just have this constant blitzkrieg of escalation and intensifications of aggression toward Russia and China. I want to know what your opinion is about the relationship between U.S. fragility and where a lot of people's eyes are right now, and how it's all related, because I get frustrated when I hear, these issues get separated, right? The what happened to Libya, how the U.S. Intervened in Libya
I can't hear you.
with the U.S. relationship with China.
Yeah, see, Danny, we're entering into very complicated territory because we're going to have to deal with the fact that, um, you know, policies have unintended consequences. And in a sense, the US policy over the last 20 years, from a position of extreme strength, I mean, let's be clear about that. United States has an immense military power, has base structures all over the world, continually building new base structures. Terminal 3 in Accra Airport in Ghana has been taken over by the US military. There's a conversation that the US is having with the Zambian government to construct some sort of base in Zambia. So the US, with this immense power, has attempted several adventures, let's call them that, and there have been unintended consequences. Let's lay out one of them. As I said, right now in Samarkand, Thursday and Friday, 15th and 16th of September, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is meeting. This was an organization set up in 2001 by powers that surround Afghanistan. They had the first meeting in Shanghai. That's why it's called the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Many Central Asian countries which had been worried about the expansion of the kind of Taliban's ideology into their countries, particularly Uzbekistan. This meeting, by the way, the 22nd summit, is being held in Samarkand in Uzbekistan. Well, interestingly, over the course of these 20 some years, more than the Central Asian states have joined the SCO, including India. Very interesting. India, close ally of the United States, is a member of the SCO. Iran was just inducted into the SCO. Now, one of the interesting features of the immense sanctions policy against Iran, the sanctions policy against Russia, has been that neither Russia nor Iran have been able to sell their energy to Europe, which has created a problem for Europe. In fact, on the 24th of August, Iran's oil minister Javed Oli said in public, he said in Tehran, that Iran is willing to sell energy to Europe in order to get it through the winter. Of course, it's a sly thing, because what he's saying is we'll only do it if you can get the US off our backs, because otherwise we can't sell you oil. Meanwhile, at this SCO meeting, when Iran becomes a full member of the SCO, comments were made on the sidelines of the meeting in Samarkand that Russia is going to increase its sale of energy to China, already has increased it. In fact, what was to go through Nord Stream will now partly be diverted to the Chinese, and the Chinese are going to increase their buy of energy from Iran. This is interesting. Xi Jinping was to have gone a few months ago to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia was a major exporter of energy to China. Those sales have been declining as China has picked up buying from Iran and from Russia. Now, I really don't want to exaggerate this point, but it is true that these policies have an unintended consequence. What is the unintended consequence? The integration of Asia and parts of Eurasia. I mean, parts of Europe are integrating.